place, Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The time, just before 11 o'clock on the last Sunday in May. Over 300,000 fans wait for the start of what's been called the biggest sporting event in the world, the Indy 500, America's most famous race and the richest prize in motorsport. The razzmatazz is nearly over. The preparations and build-up have been going on throughout the month of May. Now the 33 fastest cars from qualifying runs take their place on the starting grid. Ahead lie 500 miles on the Speedway's oval track. The speeds will be astonishing. The fastest cars will touch 230 miles an hour. The rewards match the risk. Prize money of $7 million. Driver Emerson Fittipaldi will earn over $1 million if he wins. More importantly, an Indy champion takes his place in the pantheon of American heroes.
When you win Indianapolis, made in America, your life change. I mean, when you go anywhere, they don't say that's Emerson, that's the Indy winner. I mean, that's incredible how popular and how big Indianapolis is in America, and not just in America, all over the world, but mainly here is amazing.
The 2.5-mile oval is the best-known example of America's unique approach to motor racing. The British Indy winner Jim Clark described it as 800 left-hand bends. But then American racing grew up in a different tradition, a world away from the elite Grand Prix circuits of Europe. American racing developed on the dirt tracks of small-town USA, and it still flourishes there. Events were often held at state fairgrounds on oval tracks designed for horse racing. The sprint cars that roared around the bumpy tracks were usually driven by their owners, who relied on the cash prizes to stay in racing. In those early days, this is where a driver made his name.
This was very popular racing. On 1,000 Sunday afternoons, the dust was flying in the bull rings of America. And it was hairy racing. And the way you proved that you were in the top rank was, as my colleague Joe Scalzo puts it, by dying. Dangerous. Only thing I can compare it to is bullfighting, the way they carried him out of there.
Driving a sprint car, I tell you, you better have your mind totally 100% on your driving. You better pay very close attention to what you're doing, and you better be in good physical condition, because it's a very demanding race as far as strength is concerned, because you had to manhandle a sprint car on the dirt, because you had to fight the chassis too. It's very exciting. I'll tell you, the people in the grandstand just go wild, and the best man wins that day anyway. I drove a couple times without a helmet at all, and never had gloves, never had a jacket, just a t-shirt, the same t-shirt that you go down at the 5 and 10 cent store and buy a t-shirt and slip it on.
The American motor industry, unlike the European, was not involved in racing. It was left to specialist car makers to meet the demands of America's racing drivers. The outstanding designer of the time, the manufacturer of this revolutionary car, was Harry Miller. Son of a German immigrant, he was an intuitive engineer without much formal education. From his factory in Los Angeles came a stream of successful racing cars like this Miller 122. In 17 seasons from 1921, Miller cars won 87 championship races. With the help of draftsman Leo Gusen and machinist Fred Offenhauser, his design shaped American racing cars for years to come.
What distinguishes the classic Miller engine and the Offenhauser and the Drakes after it for half a century was all present in the original Miller 8 of 1920. This built-up construction was a godsend to the typical American racer. He was, more often than not, an owner-driver. He was utterly dependent on what he made racing his car for his livelihood. And another thing Miller did, he produced these lovely items in quantity to the most exacting specifications. Every part had a drawing. You could order a part from Miller or later from Offenhauser or Drake with reasonable confidence that it would fit your engine 3,000 miles away. They blew up a fair amount. They were stressed. And when they started supercharging them, there was an awful lot of supercharger trouble. And the amazing thing was the supercharger was right between your legs in the 91s and 122s, and when the little fast-spinning impeller came apart, you really had to pull your toes back in a hurry. And you had the clutch down there, too. You were really riding in a cockpit with a lot of shrapnel about to come up in your face.
For a brief and spectacular period in the 20s, America embraced a new kind of racing well suited to the sleek and powerful Millers, Board Speedways. These were high-banked ovals built entirely of wooden planks. The typical mile-and-a-quarter track required over 1 million feet of timber. Their attraction was their speed.
This was an elegant form of racing, which was unusual for the American grease monkey race driver image from the dirt tracks. The speeds were incredible. Harry Hart's went in 1926 with a Miller 122, averaged over 135 miles an hour for 300 miles.
Board tracks were hard to maintain. Weather and wheels shredded the wooden surfaces. Gaps in the planking caused crashes like the one that killed Ray Keach, a famous driver of the day. Lou Meyer was just behind him.
Ray Keach went by me to take over first place, and he apparently hit a hole. He hit the top guardrail, which there was a steel band bolted all the way around the track to it. It came down across the track. When I came into the turn, I see this ribbon coming down off the top. For an instant, I didn't realize what had happened, but then I hit it.
Board racing was killed by the Depression. There was no longer the money to maintain the tracks. One by one, they shut down.
All these board tracks are gone now. They were blown down in hurricanes, they burned up, or they just gave way to the ravages of wind and weather. The last one, Altoona, was torn down in 1931.
The event that survived was the Indy 500. It was inaugurated in 1911, 2 years after the Speedway was opened. Early on, the track was paved with 3 million bricks and so got its nickname, the Brickyard. European cars and drivers raced there for the first few years, but by 1920 it had become an almost exclusive American preserve. What was needed was a reliable car with a powerful engine, able to run at high speeds for many hours. Brakes and gearboxes were less important. And these were the sort of cars Harry Miller excelled in making. Like the English designer Colin Chapman 30 years later, Miller was obsessed with building cars as light as possible. In this pioneering front-wheel drive Miller 91, he did away with the prop shaft, seated the driver lower, and so reduced the car's size and weight. He even experimented with the rear engine car at Indy in 1938. His impact on the race lasted for years. Offenhauser's developments of Miller engines powered Indy winners right up until 1978. Harry Miller's cars, in one form or another, made the Indy 500 their own. Lou Meyer drove Miller's to victory 3 times.
We certainly had a fine ride today. The car ran wonderful. We had plenty of gasoline left. We had a nice day, and it certainly was a most enjoyable race I've ever had here since I've been running, and this makes my third win for the 500-mile race at Indianapolis.
The track was rough, and the bricks would buckle on account of the heat. And at Indianapolis, in the first turn, you wouldn't come back on the ground on account of that bump there for sometimes 30, 40 feet. Come back down onto the track. And that's where we had lots of our accidents too. The trick is stay between the walls. And we had a concrete wall at the bottom of the track. And we had a concrete wall at the top of the track which leaned the wrong way. It leaned outward instead of inward. And when you hit it, was just shoot you right over the top. You did not get a chance to relax. Like going down the straightaway, if it's smooth and nice, you could probably relax some. But you didn't relax in our car. They always wanted to get away from you. It was pretty rough.
Miller's designs left an enduring mark on motor racing across the world. They were often ahead of developments in Europe. But Miller himself made little enough from his inventions. He had to sell his business in 1933 to Fred Offenhauser.
Poor Harry Miller. He lost practically everything. He just went bankrupt in the Depression. He was a feckless businessman. He had a bookkeeper, of course, but he had no idea of cost accounting. Beautiful front drive, $15,000. Rear drive, $10,000. Extra engine for either one, $5,000. These figures were just pulled out of the air. And he spent it as fast as he got it. He lived high. He liked the ladies. He liked fine clothes. I've never seen a picture of Miller in which he wasn't immaculately dressed. Never. Even when working on the dyno, he's got a vest and a tie. And he went through his money. He was expecting to live on royalties from designs and income from the sale of his business, but they went bust too. And times were changing. People had no patience with visionary ideas.
Indianapolis's one annual event was always marked by celebrations and showmanship. It went through good times and bad, but for 30 years, there was no car maker at the Indy to match Miller's genius for innovation. A typical car of the 30s was this Studebaker. It was one of 5 beautifully prepared models entered by the company to take advantage of new rules. These encouraged the big manufacturers to participate. They all lost to a Miller engine car. Over the years, a special kind of car evolved to race in this glamorous but internationally isolated event, cut off from the mainstream of world motor racing. It was the classic Indy Roadster. Big and robust, designed for power and endurance, it provided few comforts for the driver. Often it was built just for one race, so everything in the car was slightly offset for Indy's left-hand corners. This conventional design dominated Indy racing for years. Though little was tried to improve the aerodynamics of the bulky Roadster, there were some technical advances. The Belon Special, built by Frank Curtis, had its engine laid on its side. It won in 1957 and 58. By then, fast and reliable though they were, the Roadsters had become outdated. In 1961, American racing legend A.J. Foyt won the first of his 4 Indies in a traditional front-engine roadster. But back in 9th position was a portent of things to come, a car whose design would finish the roadsters as surely as the Ice Age killed the dinosaurs. The car was the revolutionary rear-engined Cooper. It was driven by Jack Brabham, who had twice carried off the Formula One World Championship in Coopers. It was dismissed at first by Speedway regulars as the funny car, but its rear-engine design soon changed the shape of Indy cars as completely as it had swept aside front-engine cars in Europe. It took a few years longer in America, and in the event, it wasn't the Cooper that did it. It was Colin Chapman who achieved the breakthrough at Indianapolis with a rear-engine Lotus specially designed for the race.
The racing genius of Europe at that time was Colin Chapman. So I invited him to come to the race in 1962 when it also happened to be my first race, and bought his ticket, and he said, sure, I'll come over. And it was right after that race that I made contacts with Ford on his behalf and our behalf, and that was the beginning. And he and I went and convinced Ford that with an engine that they could provide, that a car that he would design and build at Lotus would get the job done.
I was horrified to see the way that the design of cars had stagnated over there, insofar as they just hadn't had the spur of competition that we'd had in Europe to evolve newer and better cars. And really I felt that all we needed to do was to take a European-style car to the state which we'd already evolved our racing car in Europe and take it to America, and it would be successful. Added to which, of course, the attitude in America was goaded us on a bit, insofar as that they felt that the only sort of racing was Indianapolis-type racing, and that all this Grand Prix racing was just fun for the boys. But when we won the race, they all started to copy this.
In 1963, in his first appearance at Indy, Jim Clark came second. He went on to win 2 years later.
When this new blood, this new sort of approach to automobile racing arrived, with the Cooper, with Jack at first, which didn't look, unless you were very perceptive, it didn't look like a real threat. And then came the Lotus. All of a sudden, it was a revolution. And the genie had been let out of the bottle, so to speak.
The move to rear engines turned into a stampede. Unhappily, not all the new cars were properly tested, and following European practice, they were now fueled by petrol. In 1964, disaster struck on the first lap and left 2 drivers dead. Petrol was banned after this, and Indy racing returned to alcohol-based methanol, a less combustible and safer fuel. 1964 was the last time a roadster won at Indianapolis. Indy competitors now embraced the rear-engine revolution with all the fervour of converts. The Bardell Eagle shows how elegant the results could be.
When we seen the Lotus car, it was a lot further developed than Jack Brabham's, and it was very light. In fact, I heard Colin Chapman telling one of his mechanics there was some washers on the bolts. He says, I don't want them washers going for a ride, take them off. So he wanted everything light. We had learned something from Chapman. There was offset chassis and different spin combinations, suspension, roll centers. I paid a lot of attention to all that because I knew it was the coming thing.
The rear-engine revolution from Britain finished the All-American Roadster and almost put an end to the building of Indy cars in America. Nowadays, they are mostly made in Britain. In the 1984 race, 29 of the 33 starters were designed and built by the British firm March. The most successful team at Indianapolis is Penske. They've won the 500 8 times in 2 decades. For a while, like most contestants, they used March cars, but now they build their own here at their factory in Poole, in the south of England. These days, an IndyCar employs the latest technology. It incorporates design innovations like aerofoils and ground effects. It has a turbocharged engine, banned now in Formula One. Much of the car is built of space-age carbon fibre. This is the main structure of the car, lighter but stronger than steel, onto which the suspension and engine are bolted. The modern Indy car has a lot in common with those built for Formula One, but there are important differences to suit the demands of the speedway.
Well, the cars are considerably heavier than a Formula One car. The car is much bigger. It weighs 450 pounds more than a Formula One car. The fuel tank of an Indy car weighs 47 pounds, and it's built to a American military helicopter specification. So the whole car is considerably stronger. The driver is best protected.
Indianapolis offers its own particular kind of dangers.
The accidents, when they do happen, are extremely violent. One is racing within the confines of a solid concrete wall, not an Armco barrier or rubber tyres or anything like that. And with speeds of up to 235 miles an hour, a crash under those circumstances has the violence of an aircraft accident.
A feature of the Indy 500 is the 3 weeks of testing and the 2 weekends of qualifying before the race. There are no guaranteed places, only the fastest will qualify, so no technological trick is missed to extract the last drop of power and speed from the car and ensure its place on the starting grid.
Where the technology really comes in for the driver that utilizes it today is really actually outside the car, after you've run. I have a laptop that I keep in my room, a laptop computer, and at the end of the day I'll get a disc from the team and I'll take it back to the hotel at night and plug it in. We monitor everything on the car, the suspension, the ride heights, the shock travel, the shock velocity, the speeds, the boost pressure, all the temperatures, throttle positions, steering positions. We monitor all of that and chart it. And I can take that back over to the room and bring it up on the graph, up on the screen, and do overlays of from one lap to another after I've made a change in the car, overlay the speed through the corner or whatever, and see which one was better. Obviously, the dash now is all digital readout. You utilize all of that during practice, qualifying, and everything else. But then really when the race starts, it's the old saying, kind of like in the older days too, you just put tape over it, because if something's going wrong, I'm going to go until it quits anyway.
All top-class racing imposes great strains on its drivers. At Indianapolis, they must also cope with its incredible speeds.
The pressure on the driver, when a small mistake can literally be fatal. And you have to take that risk, and the driver's got to get out and drive it, not knowing what he's going to find until he actually gets to the limit at 220 miles an hour. It's breathtaking. It's not just turning left.
If you start out tense and you fight the car and you fight the G-loading, it'll wear you down. I don't care who you are. So you have to learn to relax. Let the grip loosen up and let the forearms relax a little bit. Kind of mold into the side of the car. Just get everything comfortable and let the weight be distributed.
In the 2.5-hour race, an Indy car will come into the pits several times to refuel and change tyres. Part of the winning driver's skill is to judge the best moment to make a pit stop. Indianapolis's oval speedway is very different from the Grand Prix circuits of the rest of the world. Only 4 men have been Indy winners and Formula One world champions, and the only American to have been both is Mario Andretti.
You always better respect this place, believe me, because it has a way of really fooling you. As I say, if you have a lot of experience, you go in there, oh, this is a piece of cake, it was really easy. And no sooner do you think or say that, it's going to catch you. So it's a place like no other in the sense that requires just so much more concentration, the concentration factor because of the high speed. You know, we're approaching the corners at 240 miles an hour. And I mean, it's like threading a needle. To do it right, you must really know what you're doing. So the concentration factor is just paramount and like no other place because things happen so fast.
Until 1974, there was an average of 1 death a year at Indianapolis. Nowadays, despite the increased speeds, fatal accidents are rare, but crashes are common.
I've had things happen on the racetrack. The car get loose, jump sideways on me for some reason, and the guys see it happen. And I come back in and say, you know, the car I was going in, the car, you know, the nose dropped on a little bit, and I felt it start to pin, and then it started to get this way, and so I caught it and had to correct it, and it stayed for a while, but then started again, so I had to wind more into it, and let it slid for a while, and then finally, you know, luckily it caught, and then I had to unwind it to keep it from snapping back the other direction. You know, got it to settle that way, and I did a second one and straightened out. And I'm telling them all of this, and they say, you're crazy, we saw it, and it happened like that.
There's no denying the drama in the cauldron of the Speedway, but some people are beginning to wonder how much faster the cars can go.
The speeds are now getting to the stage, or have got to the stage the last few years, where they're really too quick. They're really too quick for the reactions of the driver to keep pace. He now has to commit himself to the corner before he gets there and decide whether he's going to be able to go through that corner flat or not. And if he's wrong, he's got a very serious situation on his hands because the velocity is going, he just hasn't had time to make adjustments and correct.
In 1991, the Penske team won again. And Rick Mears became only the 3rd person in the Indy's history to win the race 4 times. A fitting champion in this unique celebration of speed, technology, and showmanship.
You work all year to get back to this race, basically, to try to win this one. I mean, that's the #1 race that you want to win. And that's our Super Bowl.